275. And I'm joined by Martin Melly.
You are?
I'm your host, Jamie, of course. Stephen was about to correct me. And I'm also joined by Stephen.
I was about to point to you and say, and you are, but then that would have been absolutely terrible. So yes, I am Stephen. I'm glad to be here.
And the camera is recording this week.
Oh, Christ.
Jamie has pressed record, and we're going to have the names underneath here this week, so people in the comments know who we are. It's been a couple of weeks since we've featured on the YouTube.
Thanks to anyone who watched that, despite the fact it was audio only. That was amateur hour from us last week. We recorded an entire podcast. It wasn't fully done. I think what we did was broke for a little bathroom break and realised the camera wasn't on. I came back into the room and everyone was sitting there with their head in their hands.
I was trying to swallow my own fist off the back of that. But look, it's a long season. Some things you just have to shake it off, Melly, and say.
No one's here for the professionalism. Let's just go on with it.
It doesn't matter. But we're here now. We are back. And as always, this podcast is brought to you by our Patreon, which has seen an influx of listeners this season. We are very appreciative of it. If you want extra content, if you want fan-led Celtic coverage and features and podcasts and videos and just generally more of us three, you can sign up to patreon.com/20minutetims. There are various ways to support us there, levels beginning at less than £2 a month. That's Happy Meal money. So for the price of a Happy Meal, you can get extra podcasts from your three favourite Celtic podcasters and right into the football. Things are not going well, Melly, for Celtic's Ange Postecoglou. This is not the start of the season that we wanted. It's not the start of the season we hoped for. And I've got to admit, I am worried about the direction of this season. Let's talk about the Dundee United game. That 90 minutes in isolation, it wasn't great. It followed a pattern of not great performances we've seen in the league recently. What did you make of it?
It was really poor, really, really poor. Look, watching it back, Celtic had plenty of chances to win the game, but being at the game, it was dreadful watching it, sitting there going, this is terrible. This is terrible. There's nothing here. There's no intensity. There's no press. I just couldn't see what was happening with Celtic. We only created chances because we have the better players, but even still, we should be winning that game. It's Dundee United. Last week it was Livingston. These aren't really top six teams we're dropping points against. These are bottom six teams. And I know what you're saying about worried about the direction and this rebuild and all that. Like, this was probably coming, but because we had a decent start in the league, we thought, right, we can get off to it. But again, we're just missing our captain and our top player right now, and it has an effect on the whole team, and it's a really big effect.
We're looking at that lineup, Stephen, and there's a lot to talk about here. You don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater with Ange Postecoglou. There's a lot to talk about off of just a 1-1 draw with Dundee United, which is strange. But again, everyone's attention turns to the lineup. Everyone's attention turns to the quality that we've got there, particularly on the bench. You're looking at players getting injured during the game as well. We've lost McCarthy to an injury during the 90 minutes. We lost Juranovic during the 90 minutes. But I keep coming back to the fact, now maybe this is a simplistic view, but that 11 players available to the manager should have been good enough to beat Livingston, and they should have been good enough to beat Dundee United at home. I
think on paper that's probably true, but I'm starting to have genuine worries now. And again, these will be proven right or wrong in due course, much like when we come out of the transfer window thinking, well, on paper that's actually quite good, but no one's ever really going to know about it until we either are successful this season or fail spectacularly. Who knows yet? But I'm starting to actually worry about the general level of quality in this team.
I agree.
I'm quite concerned about it. I don't know if we're sometimes, I'm not speaking for anyone else right now, if I'm using the kind of figurative we here when really I just mean myself. I just worry that I see the shirt and think, well, these players are probably better than everybody else in the league. They get paid more, they cost more. But are they? Are they necessarily any better? And see some of the guys on the bench at the moment as well. I don't mean to single out guys like Sorrow who comes on and tries his best and all that, right? But would he necessarily trouble the starting 11 of many other teams in the top six? Have we just got guys who?
I'm not sure. I'm not so sure that. Right, I think maybe you're wrong in saying that they're not as good as the players in the league. Mate, I think that's too far. What I think we're dealing with here is players that are just not good enough to carry out the manager's instructions. Like looking at Starfelt, for example, in the game, before the Dundee United penalty shout, I think the key thing about Starfelt was he was getting pressed all game, right? And he was struggling with it. He get tackled right? And it was almost a mirror image of the tackle that Carter Vickers did on the Dundee United boy that got the
penalty incident?
Got the penalty shout, right? But the reason I'm talking about the Starfelt incident is that to me is a guy who still doesn't get the league he's playing in. You don't get time like that in Scottish football. People are on top of you. It's a physical league. You need to understand it. Anthony Ralston, he's become a bit of a meme. Some of his performances earlier in the season were great and we were cheering him on, and we think he's a much bit. But I mean, he is a limited player. His quality is diminished. Tom Rogic, I've been going nuts about Tom Rogic in the Discord recently. All our play goes through Tom Rogic. I don't think I think he's a pure luxury. Abada, we're going to talk about all these guys in depth. Abada, Patchy, David Turnbull, good player, but is he good enough to be the central focus of Celtic's midfield? One of the main guys week in, week out? No, he's a player. Young players developing merely that should be surrounded by better players. We shouldn't be relying on him. James McCarthy still trying to get fit. Ajeti, we were talking with all the goodwill around this table for Ajeti the last couple of weeks. I'm done with the guy. I'm absolutely done with him. And Jota, again, watching Jota in that Dundee United game, I was reminded quite a lot of Gordon Strachan and Aidan McGeady, because for massive periods of that game it was get Jota on the ball and hopefully something can happen. The same way that we used to play under Strachan and McGeady. Merely the quality in this team, it's good enough to beat Dundee United on paper, but are they good enough to do what the manager wants them to do?
Right now, no. But this was kind of always going to happen if we got injuries like that. Like I said it last week, I think it was, not a lot of teams will function properly without their captain, their mainstay in midfield, and the main man up front. He's just in Kyogo, but we've seen from the performance he's our best player. So you take that out of the team, two best players, the quality diminishes severely, and the midfield as well. Like Rogic yesterday, just either shoot or pass, mate. You can't have 20 touches every time, because he gets himself into good positions and just wants to walk the ball into the net or do that perfect pass.
Luxury, a pure luxury. If it's not going his way, he can't get the sleeves rolled up.
The problem is, but there's literally nobody there that can play the position, and we're getting to the point now where maybe him and Turnbull scored during the week, but a wee bit lacking in confidence, maybe added to the fact they're playing every single game. These are two guys that last season or in previous season barely played 90 minutes for Celtic. Turnbull came off around 70 minutes most of the games they played last season. Rogic we know about. So these guys are having to play longer than, well, they should be able to play 90 minutes, but they're playing Thursday, Sunday every week right now, and maybe it's having an effect on their fitness, their confidence, because at the end of the game when the full-time whistle finished, I looked at the players and about 5 of them were hunched down on their knees or that. They just looked bereft of any skill or fitness in the second half. It was scary.
But that's not a surprise for Tom Rogic, because Tom Rogic's never been a 90-minute player. So are we just going to, is Ange here, right? In the state Celtic's in, Stephen, is Ange, that's the manager, going to the well for discarded ideas that someone else has already written off? Melly said it, like Rogic. When was the last time a Celtic team revolved around Tommy Rogic?
Well, that's it. And I'll qualify what I mean by being worried about the overall quality of the team. This all figures into it as well, because look, we're now, Mel, you made a point years ago now, even on the podcast, about how you just chip away at quality in a squad, and all of a sudden players are promoted through default. So
Charlie McGregor made a career at Celtic. No offence.
I'll leap across this table.
Saw him yesterday at the game. Actually, I know he was injured, but I saw him at the game, still looking fine, old Charlie. Shame about the talent.
The Parkhead Pirlo. Never have a bad word said about him.
But I hate singling out players, but you look across the team and it is full of players who have been promoted through default, who are now mainstays of the team, who wouldn't previously under any other regime. And I don't want to go back to Brendan Rodgers' era, because that's fruitless. It's worthless now that we're a few years on from that. But you look at the team, we've got Anthony Ralston there, and everyone has been impressed with him, including on here, impressed with him this season, but he's now playing all the time, despite the fact that in previous seasons we would have been happy to just see him at the door. We've now got to the point where we're counting Greg Taylor as one of the key injuries. Oh, we're missing Greg Taylor. Just wait till we get Greg Taylor back. You're like, really? But Tom Rogic is another one. So it's like, would Tom Rogic be playing? Bear in mind, we had a team last season that shipped the league by 25 points, and that has taken significant hits with like Edward, Christie, El Yunusi. And I'm not talking about how we should have kept these players. That's impossible. But my main point is that we had so much quality last season. It didn't work out, and we could blame the players, we could blame the manager, we could blame the board or not, but it's gone now. But all that quality is gone. And I look across the squad just now and I wonder, not only have we not replaced it, are we now just celebrating largely mediocre players because that's what's there?
I think a lot of the time, like, I think it's fair to say that Ange has signed a lot of these players, but a lot of them he's just working with because they're there. Like Abada wouldn't be first choice. I don't think I mean, he's done well, right? And it's probably a good time to talk about him. He scored, right? So Abada's quite good for me. Coming at the back post, scoring a goal. He's good instincts in the box, but his principal job is a creator. He's there to beat a man, put a cross in, find Ajeti. And once again, I just found like that whole right side wasn't working. Ajeti wasn't working. Albian Ajeti. If the proposition for Ajeti is, I'm a poacher, I play on the shoulder, I need to find a wee bit of space you need to play me through, right? Fine. I'm not going to do anything else. I'm not going to close down for the front. I'm not going to be Furuhashi. I'm not going to be fighting to get every ball back. I'm not going to lead the defence from the front. You need to score when the chances come to you. And that miss was inexcusable. I don't care if it bounced up, he was leaning back. You don't miss. If what you say is, play me, but give me the ball in the 6-yard box and I'll score, and that's the only thing I'm going to do. Well, I gave you the ball in the 6-yard box twice and you missed twice.
He had the head on the first half, then that one from 3 yards out where, and then he had a head on the second half where he just got his whole technique wrong and he was stretching for it. And
I'm done with him.
Same with me. I always say, if you're going to have that sort of game where you're missing chances, you need to be bursting your arse to be closing things down, to be making more chances for yourself. But he just looks like he can't be bothered. And I don't want to get into body language and all that again, but it was a pathetic performance from him. Those misses, yes, it'll maybe put your confidence down, but that's no reason not to give everything you've got in a game.
And also, I just want to say thanks to Neil Lennon, because originally we were just going to loan him, and Neil Lennon said himself that he pushed to pay $5.5 million. I pushed to make that one permanent. Cheers, mate. Thanks. We'll deal with your shite after you walk out the door.
But just on the quality sort of thing, like, we're stretched now. We don't have options when players aren't playing well. We don't have anybody to bring on. But when you're looking at the overall quality, I get what you're saying, Stephen, but at the same time, Julian would have started yesterday. Taylor for not being brilliant.
I don't want to drift too far away from Ajeti, because I think there's a good discussion to be had there. So, if Stephen, have you got anything to say on Ajeti before we get to the other guys that didn't drop in?
Yeah, I've got plenty to. Well, I don't know. I mean, I might think I've got plenty to say in Ajeti, but really I could sum it up.
He doesn't want that small. Is that what you're saying?
Really, I could sum it up in one sentence. He's just not very good. I mean, I think I've been more than fair with Albian Ajeti over the course of this podcast. It even got to the point where, as recent as 2 weeks ago or so, I was saying, we're just not clicking with him. We're just not finding the right chances for him. But the guy doesn't move.
No.
He's like, I joked at the game, he's like a striker for like 1996 or something like that. One of these like old-fashioned English number 9s who just hovers about the 6-yard box. It was... The one thing I'll say in his defence is the header he had in the first half, the cross for Ralston, was absolutely wild. Having seen it back, absolutely smashed it off his head for like quite close range. When that was a mental cross actually, because Ralston had plenty of time to pick his spot and he just booted it as hard as he could at Ajeti. But the other chances, he absolutely should have scored.
I suppose my question at Ajeti would be, Stephen, how easy do you want us to make it for you? I mean, this is Dundee United at home in the SPFL. You were playing for West Ham a couple of years ago. Like, where do you want to be in your career here? How much easier does it have to be?
Well, these things are, I think, what's saving him from an absolute shellacking from fans. I think the only reason he's not getting a total, or really haven't been written off at all, because I think if Bayo was playing as often as Ajeti is just now and turning in those performances, he would have been absolutely slaughtered. But I think the only thing in Ajeti's corner is the fact that he costs so much and he's a Swiss international. He came through the Premier League and all that. Yeah. See, if you strip all that away, he basically is like Bayo or Amadou Balde or something like that.
Worse because we paid so much more for him.
Exactly. So it's like he scored a few goals.
Double worse because we decided not to sign Ivan Toney.
Well, I know everyone is so tired of that, but at the same time,
it's such a blatant example. It's such a blatant example. That's why. What
I would say finally on Ajeti is that it's just such a garbage piece of recruitment overall. Just a terrible piece of recruitment. They went out and got this guy because presumably some agent said he was available, wasn't having a good time at West Ham. Do you want this guy? Aye, why not? We'll take him. 5 million sounds good. He's for Switzerland. He scored a few goals at Basel. We've not looked into him at all. We don't know if he suits any kind of system whatsoever, because he just doesn't. He doesn't fit. I'm not saying he's a terrible player, but for whatever reason, he does not suit anything Celtic are trying to do at all. I've given him plenty of chances. He's had loads of goodwill on this podcast, mainly because we didn't want Charlie Adam to be right all those months ago when he wrote him off. But it's just
Does
a
this
bad
maybe
signing.
give an insight into why Ange meekly attempted to rehabilitate Lee Griffiths with that comment about, once he gets back scoring, because I'm just looking at Ajeti going, I've got two guys here, and Kyogo, if Kyogo's injured or he can't play, he definitely can't do it. Ajeti definitely can't do it, and I've got another one in Lee Griffiths, and that's it. For me, it's the only explanation, because, as I say, like, we've been very fair with Ajeti on this podcast, a wee bit too fair, but it's the game's a bogey for him, and the only reason he's playing now is out of pure lack of options. And we jokingly mentioned them pre-podcast, but it's a weird thing to bring up, but he reminded me a bit of Bolingoli. Ajeti's only now playing because every single other striker's injured. Bolingoli only plays when there's literally no options. None. Where is Bolingoli?
Well, I'm glad now, just taking us down that path briefly, I'm glad now that he has been taken back out of the squad. Not for that reason in itself. I'm not being that blunt about it. But what the mystery has now been solved. If Bolingoli was considered for a game and is now considered part of the squad, he is in contention for a place in the squad, as we saw when we starting the game. He's just not picked because he's pish. To be perfectly honest, that's the reason he's not in the team. It's not any inner politics about people worrying about how the fans will take to him after that, what he did last season, because that all did happen. And he's still got a game, so he is considered part of the squad. He's just not picked.
The problem is with that, we could be playing Juranovic in his correct position on the right, have a proper left back in. So all these injuries just throw. I'm willing to say all these injuries, in some part, have thrown off what Ange's trying to do. And you wanted to run through the injuries. We've got I can't remember how Julian got injured. Can you?
Into the post.
Yeah,
so he cracked into the post during the game. Greg Taylor was injured in a fall. He hurt his shoulder against AZ. Juranovic, there we go, pulled up mid-game. McCarthy injured after a couple of heavy tackles in the Dundee United game. McGregor picked up a knock against Ross County and he struggled to shake it off. Forrest, I think, was injured in the AZ game as well, pulled up in that game.
Forrest's been injured for the better part of over a year now,
including
as well.
The injury he got against Riga last year. I don't think he's ever fully recovered from that injury. Yakimakis, no pre-season, injured in the warm-up, and Kyogo injured on international duty. I mean, it is just bad luck. It's not like, was it Arsenal went through a really bad spate of training injuries? It's not like that's happening. It's bad luck. It's things that you can't. So when all of those players are what you would consider first team players, when they're all pulled out of the squad for various times with various injuries all at the one time, it is going to throw off what the manager's trying to do.
It is, and the players that have come in are either not quite good enough or young guys that have just basically joined the club, or like the guys like Rogic and Turnbull. You'd want one out of two of them in midfield, and then you could rotate between them, but we've literally no options. Abada, while he does get the goals, he's got to do more in matches for me, like you were saying. I don't mind it on the left-hand side with Jota. He seems to be the more creative one, the guy that puts the crosses in. Abada will score, similar to like Roberts and Sinclair. If you get one creative one scoring, that's fine. But when Ajeti's through the middle, it all breaks down because there's nothing there. There's no link-up play. There's no dropping off. There's no pressing. There's no creating the space for those two guys. So that all breaks down. And then in the midfield, when Rogic just needs 20 touches, and then like the injury to McCarthy, it was a bad tackle. So I'm not going to say, he's injury prone, because it was a sliding challenge that was quite bad. But as soon as Sorrell comes on, honestly, it was one of the worst halves I've ever seen from a Celtic player. The amount of passes that went astray, again, getting the wrong side of players and fouling. And when he went off and Juranovic went off, Montgomery came on, and again, mate, you can pass to a Celtic player if you want. It was unbelievable.
The thing about it is, it wasn't just him. I was watching the game, and the amount of passes that went astray, it was like a lot of the players, there was no patterns to play. It's like they didn't know where each other was going to be. The amount of passes into space and no player was there, and you think to yourself, this just looks like a team that have never played together. It looks like, as I've said about a million times, it looks like a manager struggling to get his ideas across to players who are not all in the same wavelength.
They're not in the same wavelength, but they're not the same quality level, same level of fitness. This is the problem with this massive rebuild. It's why no team does it unless they have to, because when you change all that, when you bring in so many new players to play a new system, it's going to take time. Add in all these injuries and players missing games, signing players late. If you were picking your first Celtic 11, it'd be nothing like that team, but you'd want them to play a run of games where you get maybe 8, 9, 10 of them all playing week after week, so they get to know each other, get to know the system. But it's impossible right now with the amount of games and injuries we have. And I'm looking at that game and going, that's another game we should have won. We had the chances, but even if we had won the game, I'd still be very concerned by the performance.
So, and that's it, Stephen. This is the thing. There's like so much going on at once, because when you look at the game, we hit the bar 3 times. Ajeti missed from 2, and you know, and Dundee United should have at least had one guy sent off. The keeper should have walked for that tackle. An abysmal one. Clancy had a nightmare.
Father Clancy.
For both teams, man, he had a shocker.
He had an absolute shocker. Yeah. But on another day, that's a game that you win. That's a game that you win. And also on another day, in isolation, if we didn't have that bad result against Livingston, we've not had a poor start to the season. That's one of these games in a season called, Christ, Dundee United were lucky to get away from us there.
Yeah, I don't want to come on here and catastrophise after every single dropped point, but the fact is we're 7 games into the season, we've already dropped points in 4 games, and that's a worry. It's almost impossible to just say, yeah, well, in isolation, in a vacuum, this game was actually okay, we could have won, but what you do is you find yourself saying that so often it starts to become reminiscent of last season, where you think, well, you know, we're going to kick into gear. And the injury thing is a big problem. There's no getting away from that. I don't want to use it as an excuse. So I've had that debate before, or discussion before, where it's either excuses or reasons. But what is clear to me, that we talk about the quality of the squad, but this team cannot play without Kyogo and Callum McGregor. It just can't. And I think you could reasonably replace most of the other injuries. You would take a hit, but in terms of the actual style of play and Ange's system, which has become another tiresome topic of debate as well, because
he's there to manage and find a way to win these games.
Yeah, I don't think it's worthwhile having one rigid style of play and not ever moving from it, which is what I don't believe Ange Postecoglou does. I'm sure he has a kind of an idea of how he wants the game to be played out, but it shouldn't be dependent on 2 players, which it is. And you know, I'm not saying it is, but it's how do you replace anyone of the style of Kyogo with Albian Ajeti? It'd be like Chelsea not having Lukaku for a couple of games. Like, we've got Albian Ajeti up front.
That's the thing.
Play the same way.
See this thing about, I don't for 1 minute believe the failure here is Ange has an approach that he will not shift from, and he is going to keep playing this approach even though it's patently obvious it's not working.
Yeah,
I don't think that. My problem is, in an alternative universe, I can see, at the moment, I can see another manager getting better results with a Celtic team. Now, I'm not saying that's what we need to do. We need to bring another, but what I'm saying is, I can see another manager coming in and getting to grips with this. We've seen managers come in and have good starts to the season. There's no getting. This is a terrible start to the season.
Yeah,
I'm not sure, to be honest, mate. When I'm looking at that, when I'm looking at the available players right now, I'm not seeing an obvious formation. We can't go 2 up front. We don't have 2 strikers. If we go 4-2-3-1, Ralston and Montgomery bombing on the outside, is that going to be any better?
To be honest, I'm not to put you down, Martin Melly, but you're not a football manager. You know, you're not. You don't
game,
you play the game. But you know, a football manager would be able to come in and find a winning team out of that. I mean, God, if that boy for Dundee United, who their manager looks younger than all he is and made me feel like I'm wasting my whole entire life doing podcasts, and he's managing a football team, if he can pull together a team to get it, I mean, they played some better football than us.
Aye, but
if he can do it,
it's not just that.
Give him Angie's players. Swap the managers. What do you think the outcome is?
With these players, with the confidence, with the fitness, I don't think
the truth. Swap the
managers. I don't think
it's
been much different.
So I think you swap the managers in the day and Dundee United are winning that game.
We've said that in the past in European games, yes, and I think in European games that could be true. In Scotland, no.
I'm not saying that boy's a better manager than Ange Postecoglou, by the way. I'm just saying on the day, given the resources available, the way Dundee United played, I think they could have got a result against us.
I don't even think Dundee United played that well, to be honest. I don't think they had to. There's some decent spells and they were quite open as well, but it's just as soon as you take out certain elements of the team, I was looking at it in the second half and I was going, well, we need to get better at left back because Montgomery wasn't good enough. The main man in your midfield, your holding midfielder, Sorrell, had a nightmare. The 2 guys ahead of that, Rogic was terrible. Your 2 wide players, one was Jota was decent, it was just give him the ball. Abada got the goal, and you were terrible up front. So you're looking through it and you're going, terrible there, terrible there, terrible there. Add all that together. What what did we do? We brought in 2 subs because of injuries and then nothing to change the game because there literally was nothing. So I just don't, we need to ride this out right now and hope to get a couple of players back after this international break. Hopefully McGregor will be back and Kyogo will be back, and then maybe get Forrest in, because I can't see where the next win's coming from right now after this. The Leverkusen game is going to be very difficult, and Aberdeen away, they're not in great form, but we just need to win that game. And I don't know if I'd agree with just changing the style right now, because I don't see a better style for Celtic to play.
You don't need to change the style.
But
what
what do you mean by just find a way to win a game? Get a goal from a corner?
Well,
Put a big man up front?
Well, we can try. Well, the problem we've got against Dundee United was in Livingston, they forced us wide. They just kept forcing us wide. You need to say, well, we're the better team. We need to have players, that can dictate our game onto the opposition.
Yeah, and Rogic and Turnbull are meant to do that, but if they're not performing, what can you do then? Because you turn to your bench and there's not one midfielder on the bench, so what do you do? How do you change that?
But how does any manager change anything? How does any manager...
making substitutes or bringing somebody on? Do you want to bring on Owen Moffat, 18-year-old boy?
No, I want Ange Postecoglou to find a solution. I don't know the solution. I'm not the Celtic manager, but he should be able to find it. He's got all these players that are all much better than Dundee United at home. If you can't possibly tell me there was no solution to that a football manager couldn't find. I just don't believe. I mean, it's not up to me to come up with the solutions. I'm not the football manager. But what I'm saying is, with all the tools at his disposal, everything Ange Postecoglou's got, injuries to 2 players, which is what we're talking about, Kyogo and McGregor, either the best players. But you can't just say, oh, well, I can't do anything, and we're just going to keep dropping points because I don't have the players.
That's fair enough, but it's not just 2 players. That's your 2 best players. And as I said, Julian would have played. Taylor, whether you think he's good or not, he would have played. Forrest would have played. So that's 5 players instantly going to the team. Or it's 5 players you could have available on the bench to make a change. You can't just go, right, it's no working one game or a couple of games because we've no options. Throw my whole philosophy in the bin and go with this formation, because everybody says, look, what's plan B, or we should have done something different. If there was something obvious to do, managers would do it.
No, you can't. I don't think you can say that either. Because
right, can you tell me one thing he could have done with the players available yesterday apart from get them to play better?
I just think you can't say, if there was something to do, he would have done it, because then you could write off every loss that every manager dictates, because it's not, you're instantly revolving. What's the word I'm looking for? Not revolving the manager. Absolving.
Absolutely, yeah.
You're absolving the manager of for responsibility.
Look,
I don't think you can only play one way or one formation.
No.
But you think there's in-game tweaks. Now, you're putting me on the spot on a podcast saying, what could they have done to win the game? I'm obviously don't know that. But for example, could you instruct your wingers to come inside rather than consistently try to get to the byline and throw the ball in? Because
Jota did do that, and that's when he hit the bar. So I think a certain amount of luck does come into it. But on just finding a way, there are ways, and there were ways, and Celtic were doing them. It's just that when you pass to Tom Rogic and the ball rolls up his leg and bounces off his shoulder and somebody else breaks away with it, or when Turnbull does similar, when McCarthy, who has been the subject of huge debate as to whether he fits into this system or not, if he turns and plays a blind pass with his left foot, it's straight into the midfield and Fuchs or whoever breaks away with the ball, there's nothing a system's going to do about that. That's simply just players playing badly, making the wrong decisions.
So do you think the issue is, this is a good point we've stumbled upon, do you think the issue here is then Ange's management, or do you think it's the players are not good enough?
I don't think the players are very good. I think that some of them are woefully off form. I don't think any of them are terrible players by any stretch of the imagination. I just think...
Sorrow.
But apart from Sorrow...
Could you say to Tom Rogic, for example, you're only allowed 2 touches max. You need to take the ball and you need to give it away to somebody, and you need to tell your wingers, as soon as the ball goes to Tom, you need to come inside and give an option. Or David Turnbull, you need to be right up beside him. Because would that solve the problem of Tom Rogic taking 5 million touches and running into the box, mate?
Well, possibly, but can you tell a professional guy, I know he's a manager and all that, but 2 touches, does it actually work like that in football? And
I think so.
Celtic were terrible yesterday. I was at the game, it was painful watching. But when you're looking across it, Jota hit the bar, Turnbull hit the bar, Rogic had a great chance where he took too many touches.
He hit the bar as well.
The header. Ajeti missed 3 very good chances. Abada went down the right and blazed 2 over. If Celtic had got away with the result yesterday, could go on right. Poor performance, got the result. But when you're going on about you should have done something different, apart from getting his players to finish better, is there much more he can do right now?
I guess the problem Ange's got is that is the only solution. You have to win these games, and that is what being Celtic manager is. You need to find a way to win the games. I hate to bring up Rangers. Rangers are playing crap at the moment. They ground out with the worst result. I saw some Rangers blogger talking about the 1-0 game they won at the weekend there. The worst win I've ever seen. They ground out results against Motherwell. Steven Gerrard is finding ways to win these games. Now, Ange can
3 years, 4
but
years.
that's fine. But this is the reality of being Celtic manager. He can talk about the system, talk about not having the players. See, at the end of the day, he's going to get sacked if he doesn't win the games, and the fans are not going to put up with it.
That's fine, but we're 7 games in here, and look,
I'm not calling for him to be sacked. I'm just saying we can spend all day talking about systems and not having the players. But the reality is, you need to start winning the games. And he needs to find a way to do it. Whether he changes philosophy, changes system, comes up with a new formation, finds a plan B, goes long and sticks Joe Hart up front. It doesn't matter. You need to find a
fewer
way.
mediocre players, as I suggested in the opening minutes of this. Like, on Rangers, sorry to jump in here, but I don't know if it's necessarily Steven Gerrard that's doing that, and I've never been one of these, he's a fake manager. It's actually the coaches that do it. My point here is that I spoke last week about the outrageous goal they get away with against, I can't remember, Motherwell, it was, where the guy headed it in for the goal line, despite the fact the keeper was the only other guy on the scene. Obviously offside, right? And I don't want to get into conspiracies here, but was that Steven Gerrard that did that? Was it Steven Gerrard who missed the penalty for Dundee in the following game against him? So I think I'm not just going to chalk it up to like hard luck for Celtic, but with everything that's going against them just now with the injuries, and as I said, I firmly believe some of these players are just not very good, and we've just ended up with a load of players who are okay, but
what ones would you say aren't good enough right now?
Good enough right now, just in form.
But I suppose another way to frame it could be if shouldn't be starting every week.
Well, that's it. Well, Sorrow, Turnbull, Rogic, maybe Abada, but
Ralston.
Ralston. That sounds terribly harsh on Abada because he's scoring goals. He's got 6 goals all this season so far.
The YouTube comments are going to be like, see if you think Stephen's wrong about Abada.
Here's my home address just popping up from here.
See every play you've mentioned there, but right, Juranovic comes in for Ralston, right? McCarthy, McGregor could come in the midfield. Forrest could come in, and then Kyogo would come in. Yeah. So like they're not good enough. Would they be starting if those players were there? No, but ultimately this is the problem that happens if you're unlucky enough to have a few injuries. You have to go with these players, and ultimately it all goes back to last season, doesn't it? Because you said it the other week, like that can never happen again. No. Bringing in 12 players and we're still woefully short of quality and numbers. This was going to happen when you had a big rebuild like that, and then we were hoping we wouldn't get injuries, but it's been happening all season. Forrest get injured, Mikey Johnson get injured, Mikey Johnson's injured again. I don't want to go, because we'll end up in a circular argument here, but we need to remember it's only Dundee United and Livingston we're playing, and although these players aren't as good as the top level Celtic players, in my mind they're good enough to beat what's in front of them. And from that performance the other day, it was disjointed, some of the passing was terrible, and the game plan didn't work. And if Ange's got a group of players that trains, and in the mindset, these guys all know it. It seems to me maybe the I don't know what you want to call them, second level, not the reserves, but the players down are not really getting the way Ange wants to play. And maybe there needs to be more time on the training pitch for these guys. Maybe they've not had enough time under the manager. Maybe their mindset is, well, I'm not going to play it. I don't know. But the players might not be top level Celtic players, but in my mind, they're good enough to beat Livingston and Dundee United. And some of Ange's comments after the game have attracted a lot of interest. He says, one of the ones was he says we're disappointed in the outcome, but obviously in terms of our approach to the game and the way we played, the manner in which we took the game to them, I think it's exactly what our supporters want to see. Don't think so.
Not exactly what we want to see. I took his point about how effectively that's a kind of long-winded way of saying we created enough chances to win the game. That's kind of what he's getting at there. But to say it's exactly what we want to see is stretching it, to say the least. I think I do agree with him that he could have won that game. I mean, to hit the bar 3 times is pretty crazy. I know that Dundee United had an arguable penalty, but then there was a foul on Starfelt in the build up to that, so it could have gone either way. As much as
they should have scored towards the end as well. Did you see their chance? They had basically the whole goal to shoot.
Hart had a good save towards the end as well, kind of doing low to his left. The guy probably should have done better with it. But as much as we're sitting here saying that on another day Celtic could have won, so could Dundee United, really, if it had kind of swung too far the other direction, because Celtic were pretty poor. But I totally disagree with that. It's exactly what we want to see, because take away all the all the myth and magic about it. Ultimately, we want to see the team win.
Yeah.
And yes, there's the Celtic way of playing football. We want to see them playing attacking football, but first and foremost, we need to be winning games in this. I think the fans, I thought it was slightly disingenuous of people to paint it as the fans booing the team, the players and the manager at the game. The boos were huge. I was there, yeah. But around me, anyway, people were furious at the referee and the level of time wasting from Dundee United. Somebody got booked for time wasting and then proceeded to time waste shortly after it. He took his boot off and all that. So people were getting really tetchy around me about that. And as soon as the whistle went, everybody started booing. So I don't know if that was necessarily a direct message to the players and manager as it has been painted out, because I think it removed the context that everybody was furious about some of the decisions being made around that.
You got something to say on the original comment?
The problem I have with the comment is when you're at a game and you're getting frustrated as a fan, and I was really frustrated yesterday because I wasn't being entertained or I wasn't enjoying what I was watching, and that's the problem. We've seen it a lot with Celtic last season. That's why it was so frustrating watching it in the house. But even previous to that, the fans are there to support the team, but the team also need to give the fans something to work with here. They created chances, but they didn't have that barrage of chances. They didn't have that pure pressure where the fans can really get behind the team. The fans need to get behind the team, but at the same time, the players need to do something for the fans to get behind the team, and we just didn't do that yesterday. It was every time we had a chance, we'd do something stupid, like Sorrell would foul somebody and take the whole pressure off us, letting them give each player a chance to, or you take the free kick, you take it, until it went all the way back to the keeper. And then Dundee United, fair enough, that's their game, that's what they have to do, but you need to give the fans something to work with, and Celtic simply didn't do that yesterday.
He said it's a weird league. You call things here early, don't you? I'm not pulling up any stumps after 7 games. We do call things early in Scotland, and there's a reason why things are called early in Scotland, because it's a 2-horse race. And the rest of the league is pretty weak. The rest of the league's pretty weak, and if Rangers can get wins and draws against the majority of the league, but we're picking up draws and losses, and you open up a 7, 8, 9, 10 point gap before Christmas, you've got to factor in perhaps one Glasgow Derby loss into that. Does he get it? Because you do call things early, and that's famously in Scotland, you call things early.
Yeah, he'll be looking at it from his point of view. He can't come out and say, that's it over, can he? But of course,
imagine after 7 games. Sorry, lads, I tried my best. We'll try again next year, but that's a league officially gone.
We're not going to write it off yet because it is 6 points, 1 win against them. But that also includes us winning all our games up to then. And right now, we can't see that. So what we need to do is get through this game next week against Aberdeen and hopefully regroup in this international break, because again, it's pretty massive for Celtic. Like I said, that Raith Rovers game was massive for Celtic to get players fit, and it didn't really happen, did it? We get James McCarthy, and then he goes off here. Giakoumakis gets injured in the warm-up. Scales get a wee bit of time, then our left-back goes off at the weekend. He doesn't even come on, so it didn't really work out the way we were. It just seems like everything's going against Celtic. And on your point about Rangers, Jamie, yes, he's grinding out results, but he's grinding out results with most of these players, bar Kent, and when Rangers get an injury, they've got depth there. Yeah. Celtic don't have that. They've had a style of play. Remember when they beat us last season 2-0 at October, you said, Connor Goldson said after the game, we've been working on this style for 3 years now, it's working for us. Well, they've been working on that for 3 years. They were in a kind of similar position with Celtic when Gerrard came in. Huge changes, didn't see the benefits straight away, and you need to wait. We need to be a wee bit patient here, because you'll see similar results when Gerrard first came in. The results weren't great at the start. He got them through in Europe, similar to Ange has got us into Europa League, and then it started to get better towards the end, but it was too late for them. We can't expect everything to just go right for us, especially with all the injuries here with the turnaround. I think with Gerrard's thing, and I hate talking about them on this, but he had a style of play and he stuck to it for so long, and he got the benefits last year because he managed to weed out the crap players, get a team he wanted, and add wee sprinkles of quality. We are miles away from that so far.
Let me nail you down on something then. This is something that, I think it's helpful when discussing Ange and discussing the state of Celtic at the moment to nail down what represents success. It stops us going every week, he needs to go, he needs to stay. come
It's far too early for that.
Yeah.
But
it might be too early, and we all agree it's too early to be having those conversations. But if he loses one more game, those conversations are going to start. See if Celtic are looking if they're at the league by Halloween. The conversations,
seventh.
yeah, the conversations are definitely going to start. So you can't keep your thumb in the dam for as long as that's going to take. So for us sitting around this table, right, what represents success for Celtic this season? Come the end of the season, what represents success? So taking a sort of top-down view, no going every week reacting to every result. Obviously, we'll do that because we have a weekly podcast. But come the end of the season, Stephen, for you, what represents success for Ange?
It's a tough one, actually. I hadn't really ever fully considered that, really, what a succccessful season would look
tough
like.
questions,
I know
yeah.
it's
Paxo.
nailed me down right enough. The Fenian Paxman right enough. But it's I think the reality of this is starting to sink in. I think we are in the middle of a very, very ugly rebuild, and we talked about that all the time. Rebuild this, rebuild that. Yeah, we need to do this. But now that we're actually in the midst of it, it doesn't look very good. And I think we're starting to feel the bite of that a wee bit. It was never going to turn around in 6 or 7 weeks or 10 games or however many it's been. But I think all that taken into context, how we've started the season, I think I would be happy. Happy is the wrong word, but I think I would see it as progress, a successful season, moving in the right direction if we were simply to challenge for the league this season.
Okay.
Now, that's not me being defeatist, that's not me saying I don't care about winning the league. Just get that out of your heads right now. Of course I want to win the league, but with all the damage that's been done to this club, and it's still a shambles. I mean, we're not going to get into the board pish yet again on
Jesus
our podcast
Christ.
because I'm utterly
What a job those
exhausted
guys are
with it.
doing.
Utterly exhausted with it, but because we're a few weeks on from it, we've kind of moved on for the Dom Mackay chat. That's still hanging over us as well. The club's a mess. So with all that taken into context, I would be happy for if we looked at the end of the season and looked at the squad and thought, do you know what, this is going places. This is a squad that looks as if it
I'm
could.
going to have to press you for an answer, though.
Yeah.
Did you threaten to overrule him? All day.
Who invented the skip? Who invented right? Challenging for the league, couple of cups, maybe one
So
cup.
what does challenge of the league mean? Is that 13 points? If we lose the league by 13 points?
No,
For me, I think 5. I know that's completely arbitrary, but if we lose the league by any more than 5, 6
I know
points,
what you mean though. It's
and I think we need to get some silverware at the end of the season.
yeah, because we've already had a season without it. Those are always painful, of course, because they don't. I mean, as much as we go up and down with Celtic success, very rarely do we go 2 seasons without winning anything. So that
And this isn't us conceding the league.
No,
This
no,
isn't
no,
what
God,
we're
no.
saying, and we're already in September and we're happy to concede the league. But what we're saying is what represents success. Because I think, Melly, this is a point I made in one of the first podcasts that we did of this season. I think everyone sort of accepts what I were in a period of transition. Celtic are needing a lot of work done. We need to rebuild. But the minutiae of that is not winning every week. The minutiae of that is long, painful slog. You only get 2 transfer windows. The manager famously doesn't have a lot of time to work with his players in the training pitch. The European games come early. They're difficult. There's an early Glasgow derby to contend with. And, you know, the rebuild is not just something that you close your eyes and then you wake up and it's happened. It is week after week, day after day. The manager, everyone in the back room trying to, God knows what they're doing, but trying to support the manager in any way they can. But at the end of the season, what for you represents success?
Similar to Stephen, of course, I want to win the league, and I still believe Celtic can win the league, to be honest, if we can get players back and we can get ourselves a bit of momentum and go on a run. But if I'm looking at it sort of objectively, 25 points, cut that down. At the end of the season, I want to say, look, 2 or 3 players are added to the squad, whatever we have at the end of the season, we can go on and really do something. We can try and get into the Champions League and we can win the league next year, because if it goes any more than 10, I'd be worried. If it's around the 6, 7, you can go, well, maybe if we could have beat them in a couple of derbies, then that could be the difference. But like, I can't think of any examples, and I know Celtic is quite a team that you can't really compare to a lot of teams, but this rebuild, and I don't want to keep going back to it, but it's huge. It was never going to get fixed then. There was always going to be places where we weren't going to have enough players or enough quality. So we need to keep on the coattails of Rangers until January, and we need to bring in at least 3 players who are going to make a difference to the first 14
I think,
and go from there. And I'd like to win some silverware, but more importantly, we need to look like all it's going to take is a couple of players to be challenging for the title for me.
I think on pitch success for me, as I said, a cup, and within 5 or 6 points of Rangers is a minimum that I would accept. But I also need to see a style of play.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say there.
I also need to see the club moving in a direction. I'm not talking about, we could do a whole podcast on how we need directors of football and board clear out in a new direction for the club as a whole, and all that moving in another direction. But pitch-wise, from the boardroom down, I need to see this team going places. I need to see a club with a style and a direction, and we need to win both of the Glasgow derbies at Celtic Park. We cannot lose to them at Celtic Park. Those are another couple of milestones we have to look at. We have to at least make both cup finals and win one, and we need to be within a couple of wins come the end of the league, minimum.
And as much as we're casting forward, clearly here we can't tell the future. We can't. Well, that might not be measurable. We might not be able to tell what a team going places looks like. You will be able to tell. You will get a feeling for how the team is playing. And that's probably why we're sitting talking about this just now. It's because the team aren't playing well and this team isn't in good form.
And if you want a kernel, Stephen, of positivity, I suppose you could only look a couple of weeks ago when we had our best players and the way we were playing.
We
Still got the best goal difference in the league. 6.
We sat here not 3 or 4 weeks ago, or however many weeks ago it was, describing it as the best football we've seen played at Celtic for years in some of our lifetimes and all that. I believe I put on it. But to have gone from that to missing a couple of players, hopefully it's just the inverse of that. Hopefully we get those players back and we're suddenly back to flying and beating teams 6-0 again. Hopefully that's just the difference, but that's how precarious it is. I don't like talking about Rangers on this as well, but I think that's the key difference here. While they might not have spectacularly talented players, they have competent, ready professionals who come in and virtually every position and just fill a task. And I don't think we've got that just now. Bear in mind, I know it's not as easy as saying that to fill the roles of Callum McGregor and Kyogo. Almost impossible. But we've got players who are so far the opposite of what they bring. That's the unfortunate thing. But instead of Kyogo, we've got Albian Ajeti. Instead of Callum McGregor, we've got Ismail Asoro. And that's an unacceptable drop-off, not only in quality, but in total opposite in style from the players that we need in there. So hopefully we can improve upon that in what transfer windows to come.
See what you were saying, what your bare minimum is. What if Celtic don't get that towards the end of the season? Do you want the manager changed? If you had an option between the manager going and the board going, what would you do? Because honestly,
it's not a toin cost.
I just can't see Celtic going forward with it. This board as well. What's going to happen next year? It'll just be somebody else.
I was reluctant to get into this conversation because, again, this could be an hour, right?
Yeah.
See if the manager fails, right? The board didn't bother it. The board, as we've said multiple times, this club needs a whole new direction, right? Yeah. And if there's any doubt within the club that the board are the problem, if this manager fails, then at that point, surely they must go, we're making a mess. That's like the structure and the foundations don't exist for success at Celtic any longer. No. But I think there seems to be like all the sort of rumours and stuff about directors of football and boardroom changes and that. You would like to think that's going to happen. You would like to think that's on the way anyway. And we're at least going to get a new CEO at the very minimum, right? Some guy who's competent. Not to say Don Mackay wasn't competent, blah, 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 whatever. Right, fuck me. But I think, I don't think a season's enough. Unless it's a catastrophe. Unless we're like mid-table for the majority of the season, and it's unless it's plainly obvious that Ange can't get a tune out of this team. Even then, you still like the board are wedded to Ange. Ange is their anchor, and if he goes down, he takes the lot of them with him, undisputably. But I
like that, by the way.
Did you like that? Right? I don't think that's how anchors work, because anchors regularly go down, but the boat doesn't follow.
Don't take a ship with them. That would just be a failure of the sole task of the anchor.
Your anchor's too big if that happens. But I just we can't have another catastrophic season. We just can't.
A final point I'll make on this, and everything we're talking about, all these kind of more complex subjects than we'd like, is that we sat here all summer. Well, as soon as Ange came in, we spoke about how this board have set Ange Postecoglou.
Yogi Hughes there?
Yogi Hughes called him some like Postecoglou or something like that on SportsCenter. It's an absolute
Yogi Hughes. John Hughes is a
friend
saint.
of the podcast.
John Hughes is a saint.
What we all said on here, that it was set up to fail. Yeah. So if nothing changes all the stuff we already knew going in, and the manager fails, how can we possibly point the finger at him and say, oh, you're a crap manager, by the way?
We just don't really know enough about what goes on behind the scenes at Celtic, because when you read like what Ange was saying in the summer, he was talking about how he was involved in recruitment and he was getting involved in all the bits and bobs, and it's like he was making reference to how much experience he has and how he can help with different parts of the football department. So you don't really know like how much input and not input that he's got. And
that's a huge problem in itself, but because if Ange does fail and goes, that all goes with him, and there's nobody there. These are the same. It's the same people that bought the players last season that brought the players in this season with a bit of help from Ange. So,
but you need to be careful with that argument, because if what we're saying is all the structures from Ange up that exist, right, are useless. They're useless at recruiting players, useless at recruiting CEOs, useless at recruiting heads of sports science or whatever, useless at doing all this, but the only thing they're not useless at is recruiting managers. If you're going to take that approach, then I think you maybe need to consider for a moment that Ange is fruit from the rotten tree. If everything from Ange down is rubbish and every aspect of recruitment is rubbish, you can't say, but he's a good manager. You need to say he's maybe the wrong guy, and managers fail all the time. We discuss it in this podcast relentlessly. Managers don't work, you just change them. We said about Neil Lennon. Managers fail all the time, so you need to be careful with this argument that, you know, absolutely everything's crap and nothing can possibly succeed. It might be true, but if we're going to accept that that's true, and if it might possibly be true, then the potential for Ange being an iffy recruitment is also something you need to discuss.
And that's fine, but we've seen the 6-0, the 5-0, the games we've torn teams apart with good players available, what he can do. So you need to go with that. And they might be crap at recruit managers. These are the ones that appointed Neil Lennon in a shower.
Neil Lennon won the league the following year.
Back here again.
Yeah.
He won the league the following. Neil Lennon beat teams 5 and 6. Now, I'm not here to defend Neil Lennon, and we're going to get back on the point, and I desperately want to move on to Callum McGregor's new contract. But being a manager is more than beating St Mirren 5-0 when you've got all your best players available.
I take that on board, but at the same time, like, if we're saying he's been set up to fail, like, what's going to be different with another manager? Do you think this board will get in somebody else and do things differently? No, they won't. They'll do the exact same thing and get rid of him.
They tried that. They thought, who can we... And this is probably a good place to end. The board thought, this outsider doesn't work. He's demanding too much. He's criticising too much of the way we do things. We're always right. We need to get a guy that's compliant. We need to get somebody in here that's going to work to the way we want to work. Anybody got Neil Lennon's number? And that is how Neil Lennon ends up Celtic manager. So no, we can't go back the way. Callum McGregor signed a new contract. Now, if you want to talk about directions of the club, Callum McGregor made mention about the fact that he'd spoken to the directors and he'd spoken to the board. I don't know if off camera there was this. Talk about how good a job we're doing. Right? I don't know if there
Jamie
was
is pointing a gun for MD listening to the podcast.
It's not all on video.
In a problematic arm gesture for this support, yes, he is.
If Callum McGregor's got there's a board up, you know. And he was talking about it, he'd spoken to the directors and the board and the direction of the club, and it was all, you're going to say that about the guys that have just handed you a new whopping contract, aren't you? I think the person that's most disappointed about Callum McGregor's new contract is top podcaster and all-round handsome guy James Flynn, it says here, who predicted that Callum McGregor was going to be a one-season captain on his very popular podcast last week.
Well, you never know.
I did. The reason I thought that was because he didn't have the new contract, and I thought, he'll give it one season, do the honorary thing, and then, thanks, goodbye. There's a big offer waiting for me down south. But I am delighted that Callum McGregor's our best player has signed on for 5 years. He says he wants to finish his contract at the club. Millie's just off the back of talking for a long time, Stephen, so I'm going to continue.
It's massive. There's no doubt about it with Callum McGregor signing what is effectively the rest of his career to the club. It's huge. If these people exist, I don't know. If anyone was in any doubt about how important a player he is to Celtic, just cast your eye across the last few games. And we're getting wins in there as well. Beat Wraith Rovers fairly comfortably, if unspectacularly. But Callum McGregor is absolutely crucial to everything Celtic do, and has been for a long time. This contract effectively changes nothing other than bringing him to our attention. This week, he has been one of the most important players over the entire period of Celtic's utter dominance of Scottish football.
Remember we started this podcast, we used to have the McGregor roller coaster. We used to talk about how he was brilliant one week and not so good the next. And
we would definitely have written Callum McGregor off pretty early on.
Did you see the Celtic wiki someone dug up a snippet from the Celtic wiki. It was
Oh,
a,
yeah,
it was
yeah,
a
aye.
match report, and it was a snippet from the Celtic wiki. I don't know, somebody'd obviously written a comment as part of Callum McGregor's performance in that game. It was like, he needs to be sold immediately. He's never going to be a player.
The second most embarrassing thing on the Celtic wiki of all time, other than the boyettes.
The boyettes.
Ever remember the boyette segment? It was.
Oh man!
If you don't remember it, it's no longer with us, sadly. But I'm sorry
Boyettes.
to put you on blast. Celtic wiki is an absolutely brilliant website,
Yes.
but what the boyettes was, and not even girls either. It could have just wrote girls with an H, but it was a string of
It's 'cause
sexy ladies in Celtic shirts and stuff like that.
Some of them were photoshops. Some of
like
them were
Michelle
early.
Keegan.
Some of them were early year 2000 photoshops that somebody just googled Celtic boobs.
Is
They
it
googled Celtic boobs.
was it like Joe Guest and Michelle Marsh
Jordan
and all
and
that? Jordan.
Some of them were so tenuous that like somebody saw like, I don't know who was popular in the early, Sarah Michelle Gellar, and thrown a Celtic shirt over and quickly taking a picture. Unbelievable. Boy, I think it must have been called Boyettes because of Soccerettes.
Lindsay Dawn McKenzie. That's another one from the early 2000s.
I think it was those It must have been the Soccerettes from
yeah,
Soccer
of course.
Game. Problematic.
Oh, dear.
Anyway, Callum McGregor.
I'm delighted. It's
Sorry,
the-
Callum, I've
know.
I've ruined your bit by talking about the boyettes.
It's a great piece of business from Celtic, even though just talking about the board and all that. But this is it's one of the pieces of the jigsaw that Celtic are going to need here. I keep going back to this, but come the end of the season, Celtic are going to have a real core of players that are only in the first sort of year of their contract. Like all the players we've signed, if we sign Carter Vickers and Jota, if they turn out to be good enough, then we've got a team that should be together for the rest of this season. Hopefully get a couple of players in January, and then we can get a couple of players at the end of the season. I know it's a long time away, but Callum McGregor has to be the centre of that.
Yeah.
I'm not for like building teams around players, because as you see, if a player gets injured, it was always build a team
that's it.
around Tom Rogic. We'd build a team around a guy that can't play a full season is ridiculous for me. So Callum McGregor is usually the sort of guy you can rely on every week, but we have to get him some help in there. James McCarthy coming in is a good start, but we're starting to see now these injuries players are picking up when they get to the late 20s at Celtic. It's no coincidence. James Forrest again, Callum McGregor, great players, but we need to have adequate backup for them. And Callum McGregor going forward now, I think he's started to show the leadership we need. And a problem we had in that game at the weekend, apart from Joe Hart, we're full of wee guys. Callum McGregor's not a big guy, but he's not a wee guy. He'll dictate play. He'll be
That's the kind of crisp analysis.
you know what I mean by
I do
wee
know what
guy,
you mean,
but
but it
In
was just
stature,
it
and
was-
reputation.
not wee guy.
he's not a wee guy, but he's not a big guy. He's a medium guy. He's a medium-sized guy.
He's a sound guy, but he'll be a leader in there, and we were severely lacking that the weekend. Severely lacking an idea, somebody that can dictate play and get the boys playing the way Ange does. And Cal McGregor, Kyogo, Joe Hart are all critical to that. We need a strong spine, and those three, and maybe Julian or Carter Vickers, whatever centre half, we need to get that spine for the team and work around that. So Cal McGregor is going to be integral to that, and I'd love to see him finish his career at Celtic.
Look, the thing about the Celtic fixture list is that the games come thick and fast.
Yeah.
And you've
Sure
always
do.
got an opportunity to turn around this bad form. And what better opportunity than the team currently second in the Bundesliga? Leverkusen are coming to Celtic Park on Thursday for the Europa League. I almost don't care about that game. It's a game that when you're looking at the fixtures come out for the Europa League, you're no expecting anything, but it's one you think, right, get the team go, get the crowd going, the lights, blah, blah, blah. We could be in for an epic night. We've seen them like with the AZ game with Ange, but the way things are going at the moment, I just want to get through that game with the injuries.
Yeah, it's looking like one. You never want Celtic to lose, of course. You never want to write them off, but a defeat with a decent performance again would take it. I thought when the fixtures came out for this Europa League, it's still very early for us if we can get a point out of first two games, but right now, it's hard to say, but I don't really see us getting that point right now. I think they will beat us convincingly, but we need to put up a good fight. We need to put up a good performance, and we need to get through without any injuries, because again, this game, probably like the best game, it's the second biggest game of Celtic's week. Aberdeen is a much bigger game for me. We need to get 3 points in that. You can't sacrifice games, but it's not as if there's players we can go, I'll just play him instead. So
We're at that stage. We're playing the players instead already. We have a scouting podcast coming up, so For the Europa League games, we hire a professional scout and analyst to go and have a look at Celtic's Champions League opponents. Then
I'd love to be in the Champions League.
Europa League, and then I sit down with him and we discuss. So you sort of get what to expect, their approach to the game, how they set up for set pieces, the key players, the danger men. And these podcasts, not just saying it, are really good. We get a lot of positive feedback on it. Patreon.com/20minutetims. If you want to listen to that, it'll probably be out on Wednesday. Stephen, you're in the hot seat. What are your thoughts on Leverkusen?
There's no getting away from it. It's going to be a very, very tough game, no doubt about it. I thought that going into the Betis game and came away from that pretty encouraged by the performance, and the result was a defeat, but it was a narrow defeat. It was an exciting back and forth. However, that encouragement was also fleeting. Since then, we've lost a game and drawn and dropped some points at home, so it didn't really say much for how Celtic were going to play going forward just yet. My biggest hope for this game could really only be that hopefully it's a good performance that kicks us on a bit. That's really all I want from this. I'm not going to be daft enough to say we need to win the home games, because quite frankly we're going to be massive underdogs for a game like this, regardless of whether it's at home or not. Leverkusen are no mugs, the Jeremy Frimpong derby, if you will. I think it'll be a very, very tough game against Leverkusen, but we just need to hope it's one of those occasions where Celtic just pull it out of the bag. A big European night, crowd are there and all that. But I know I'm clutching it.
Clutching it.
I know I am, but that's really all I've got.
Clutching at cliches.
There's a big handful of cliches and just dumped them right in the centre of the table here. Take your pick from one of those guys.
You could have called it the Old Frim Derby.
Raging, absolutely raging. But that's the best thing I've got to go on, because there's nothing about this team just now where I could think, well, if Albian Ajeti just clicks into gear, they'll be terrified that Ajeti's on fire. Leverkusen's too many syllables for that song to fit in. So it's very, very difficult.
What are you doing here?
Scatman, I got that song. You talk yourself down a cul-de-sac. Do you want me to take them off?
I was saying that we're still missing too many key players. We're still missing too many vastly important players for this team for me to fancy it. But I just hope it's a good performance.
We've got the scouting podcast. We've obviously got the At the Match podcast recorded on the way to the game and then after the game. And for all in-tier members, we do an exclusive video reaction with Celtic Fans TV, exclusive content for all in. So that's patreon.com/20minutetims for the 1 millionth time. The biggest game of the week is obviously the Aberdeen game. They sit behind us in the league, 2 points. There are no wins in their last 5. The Aberdeen fans are listening to a podcast today talking about Aberdeen's season. They're not particularly happy the way things go, and their manager's already under a bit of pressure.
Tetchy. He's getting tetchy, old Stephen Glass, to be honest. He's getting into that kind of that weird, kind of Neil Lennon position with of last season, where every question he was asked was met with just suspicion, and he's kind of firing back at reporters and all that now.
Big brogues to fill there at Aberdeen for sure. This is so cliched, and I'm sick of saying it, and it gives me shivers and PTSD. This is an opportunity for Celtic to turn it around, but there's no excuse. You need to beat Aberdeen, Melly.
Yeah, we should do it. When you look at their midfield, Scott Brown and Lewis Ferguson, you're like, oh dear.
Brownie will fancy this. Believe you and me, coming back to absolutely bully this hodgepodge midfield.
You'll do that thing to Sorrow, you just put your hand on his face, just push him away.
Scott Brown's going to be walking about with a careful what you wish for t-shirt on under his Aberdeen shirt, I think.
I was a bit sceptical of Aberdeen's recruitment because it was this fast attacking football, and then they're signing 30-year-old centre-half Scott Brown. They've already got Johnny Hayes now, McGinn, but I thought some of their signings were decent, but it's just not quite working. And look, it'll take time for them as well, but that's nothing to do with Celtic. Celtic simply need to go there and win. We've done that well there in the apart from last season, obviously, but that's a bit of one-off. So we've done well up there. They always shit the bed under McInnes. I'd hope they'd shit the bed under Stephen Glass, because we really need the victory.
You cannot lose. You can't drop points to Livingston, Dundee United, and then Aberdeen. You can't drop points to all these teams that are below you in the league and expect to get anywhere, surely, Stephen.
No, you can't.
It's like the third must-win in a row for Ange.
Yeah, because what we spoke about last week as well is that the debate doesn't need to be had just yet about whether Celtic can or cannot win the league from this point in the season. I think that's premature, but there are certain realities that you're faced with if you're dropping this many points at that
margin of
stage
error
of the season. Yeah, the margin of error is almost nil from September onwards
Adds
if you
the
do
pressure
that.
every week.
Exactly, and the people will be arguing just now as to whether the league's gone or not, and I think that is crazy. But to anyone who's saying it's not, well, we might agree that not is based entirely on the assumption that Celtic are going to start playing better, and we don't have anything really to go
we
on
can
yet.
barely afford to drop any more points for the rest of the season.
Exactly.
That's
So
the reality of it.
So the answer is no, cannot drop any more points at this point, because that would be very, very worrying indeed.
Find a way to win the games. That's all you have to do.
Yeah.
Find a way to win the games. And
Do better.
Do better at your job. And on that bombshell, Melly, we shall wrap up this episode of 20 Minute Tims. Thank you so much to everyone who listens. We are glad to be back on YouTube again. If you disagree with us, we get involved in the YouTube comments below. We like to nip in
Don't
and
speak
reply.
too soon. We've not uploaded it yet.
Yeah,
Hopefully, if you're seeing this, we are on YouTube.
Yeah, if you're seeing it, we're on YouTube. Stephen, would you like to say goodbye? Would you like to sign off?
Goodbye, folks. Thanks for having us.
Martin, Melly.
Goodbye and thanking you.
Goodbye.